This is it, our final instructional video together, at least made by me for you. As you're probably well aware at this point, you're going to be making an instructional video concerning our last film in the class, which is a musical. Before I launch into the heart of today's lesson, I want to finish up a few things. One thing most importantly, and that is, I'm hoping you considered my words from the last instructional video, and I thought about this idea of the butterfly more, and I know that I didn't describe it to you perfectly enough, the concept or what was in my head. The reason why I brought up the butterfly is because, in truth, it's really hard to find an ugly butterfly. I do not think one exists. And yes, a butterfly is not exactly our closest, nearest relative. There is a strong difference between a butterfly and us. But it points out something important. Everything is created. I think we can agree on that. Depending on how you think science or spiritually, everything is created. And it's interesting to me that we're able, as human beings, to label some things as beautiful and some things as ugly. And where does that come from? One of my favorite artists, who I'm going to paraphrase, is John Cage. He's a musician who changed the landscape of music entirely from the 50s all the way to his death in the, I believe, 80s. Could be early 90s. I never keep track of people's death point, but that's a whole other story for another day. One of the things he said that I'm paraphrasing is that when he came across something that he thought was ugly, he stopped. He stared at it. And through really observing it, he realized it was actually beautiful. And so that's what I want to say to you. Your ideas of beauty and ugly come from an ideology. Everything is beautiful. Maybe not all actions human beings take are beautiful. But everything is beautiful if you stop long enough, get into the core of your authentic self, and truly observe. Last week was the climax of the course, and what we're moving into is the falling action. Now, there's something that I did. I'm taking us all the way back to the beginning and cinema history. This video, in theory, the film we're watching this week, should have really, truthfully occurred in either week 3 or week 4, sometime after the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. But I was too afraid of losing you, because I want to build great engagement. And so I felt if I gave you another historical piece, back to back with the history, with the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, you would get bored and possibly tune out. And I wanted us to get to words. Not that words are important in film. What's important in film is the image. And I'm going to grow that seed momentarily. But for engagement's sake, I did not want to go deeper into history. So what we're talking about today comes right after the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So, the heart of this week's instructional video is Soviet cinema. And, most importantly, the father of modern cinema, Sergei Eisenstein. Eisenstein, through the early teens into the 20s, was in the world of theater and learned a great deal about acting from the master, Konstantin Stanislavski. So I would say on some level, this great acting teacher, who is the basis of all of our United States acting that we see in all the films we watch, which is realistic acting, was found by Stanislavski. And then Sergei Eisenstein took that method and technique and brought that into his filmmaking. But what's exciting is Sergei Eisenstein was right at the beginnings of film in Russia. And he was not just a director or a filmmaker or an artist. He was also a theorist. And what he essentially specialized in was what we'd call formal criticism. Formal criticism looks at how art. Let me try this a different way. Formal criticism examines art for what it is. It's not thinking contextually. It's looking at the piece of artwork, trying to figure out what makes it art and what makes it great art. And so, as you might be aware from our historical talks way back in week 2, a lot of people thought that film, when it was first invented, was vulgar because anybody could watch it. It was for the masses, it was for the middle class, the lower class, even the upper classes. Everybody could watch it and get something out of it. You didn't have to really study art to get at the nuances of it. Though, let's be real, you do have to study film to get at all the nuances of it. But, film was in its early day. People weren't thinking in a nuanced way. And the truth is, watching a film, as a story unfolds, everybody can take something out of it. But the more experience you have with film and the more you understand theory and how a film gets made, the more exciting and the more profound your understanding of film is. But Sergei Eisenstein, I'm digressing, so I gotta get back on the track. Sergei Eisenstein wanted to prove that film was art. And what he did was he compared it to other art forms. He looked at literature and he looked at music. And as he was looking at those two art forms, he was trying to figure out, well, what is the basis? What is the foundation of music and literature? So, what is the foundation? What do you think the foundation is? Take a moment to pause here and think about it. I'm hoping you came up with the idea for literature. The word, one word, is the foundation of literature, or words themselves. But it's that one word that you add to another word, that you add to another word, that creates a story, or creates literature. When it comes to music, it's the notes. One note by itself can be very beautiful. But when you add a lot of different notes together, you start going to what we consider to be music. So Sergei Eisenstein brilliantly looked at film and said the building block is the photo fragment, the image. You add one image to the next image, to the next image, to the next image, to the next image, and you get a movie. So he proves that film is art by comparing it to other art forms. And this led him to the idea of montage being the basis of film art. Now, when we hear the word montage, we tend to think of seeing a romantic comedy where we see the couple getting closer and closer together over time through a quick series of images. You see them out on a date and drinking champagne together, and then you see them in the park reading poetry and having a little picnic, and then maybe you see them lying in bed together reading a book, and everything's moving very fast. One, I think, montage that we're all very familiar with is from the movie Up. A really brilliant emotional montage showing the whole life of the character until old age and where he's at the beginning of the movie. So that's how we think of montage. But montage, go figure, it's a French word. And yes, it's a Russian man, but the language of art tends to come out of France. A lot of words are pulled to understand it. Not just in film, but in art, in theater, in the decorative arts. The list goes on. Oh, in literature. I mean, everything is influenced by French ideas on art. But I'm not going to get into that right now. I don't want to digress too far. So, montage in French just means editing. And Sergei Eisenstein came up with this idea of montage as being the basis of film art, and he basically came up with this theory that there are 5 types of montage. Now I'm going to tell you right away, a lot of critics have looked at Sergei Eisenstein's work on montage, looked at his own movies and other movies, and they realized that it's great in terms of theory, and it doesn't feel like Sergei Eisenstein always used his own theories, and that there is room to argue for other types of editing, or even arguing that the types of montage that Sergei Eisenstein came up with are not valid. But I think it is interesting to look at his 5 types of montage, which we're going to do right now. What you are seeing here is the metric montage. It is the most basic, and there is no absolute length of a shot, but the editor and the filmmakers are where you want to hold the audience's attention. And so the cuts that are made are based not on what's happening in the image, but keeping the audience's emotion and attention going. Eisenstein says that if the editing accelerates, it creates a tension. So this is not about what's happening in the shot. It's just giving the audience information. So this is your most basic, the metric montage. And this clip is from the Battleship Potemkin, which you're going to be seeing for me this week. What you are seeing here is an example of the rhythmic montage. This is a very short clip I've chosen, so I'm going to play it for you a couple of times. The rhythmic montage is based on the action inside the photo fragment. So when the wave is done crashing against the shore, the cut is finished. So here is the clip again. And due to the repetition and the length of the shot, it creates a rhythm, which I think adds to the idea of the rhythmic montage itself. And in the third and final time I play this for you, I'm going to count it out so you see how it's very clearly set. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So you see there's a real rhythm to this cutting and editing. And that's the rhythmic montage. Now we have our next level of complexity when it comes to editing, and that is the tonal montage. Distilling all of Eisenstein's ideas, my feeling is the editing creates a mood. And with this, the port of Odessa, there's this mist going over the top of the ships, making them ghostly. It's creating an atmosphere, and the editing is helping with that atmosphere. There's a vibration that is coming out of this shot that gives it its tonality. Hence, the tonal montage.